Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about projects and how long they take. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how long does a coding project typically take, ballpark, parentheses, in a team setting at work? I'm teaching myself HTML and CSS and I feel like the projects I'm doing by myself are taking me too long to do. Should my projects take a day, weeks, months, what, etc.? Thank you. Well, that's impossible to say. That's sort of like asking how long would it take me to recover my health. Well, it depends on the disease. How long would it take me to build a home? Well, if I'm building a house with one story or two stories or a skyscraper, it very much depends. Now you're talking about HTML and CSS projects here, so I'm assuming that if you're teaching yourself these sort of things, it's still the same situation. It's very difficult to say how long something should quote unquote take, and in even when you're dealing with teams, that's also going to differ. It's going to differ from project to project, but also it's going to differ from from human, like the combination of humans that you have working on the project. You can have the simplest project in the world, and the people that you put on the project will make this thing take forever and ever and ever. Or you might have the most difficult problem that you can possibly imagine, and the right person or the right people will be able to solve that in a fraction of time than that somebody else does it. This idea that some people have that all software developers are sort of, we're all at the same sort of base level is absolute bullshit. The reality is that the variance in how fast something can be delivered is measured in a few key points. I'll touch on a few of them just to give you sort of an understanding of the factors that usually play in the most. But fundamentally, it's almost impossible to say how long something should take. The metric that you, or the thing that you should focus mostly on is, are you proceeding fast enough to meet the expectations of the stakeholder? That's the fundamental thing, because it really doesn't matter at the end of the day how long something takes, as long as you deliver before quote unquote the deadline or the whatever metric we have. If you think about it, that's sort of how everything works, right? There's no, you set out to like achieve some goal at a certain point, and if you don't reach the things in before that point, well, then the question is, do you have the money, the resources, the time, all the things that factor in, right, to continue? Like, is that still relevant for you? Is this sort of like a failed project now? Yes or no? And so it's, as I said, like saying that something should, if you're going to build a Hello World application, that's going to be a day tops for like a junior, hopefully for a junior software developer. Like if for a senior, that's going to be less than 20 seconds depending on programming language. So it's impossible to say at such a macro level as what you're expressing. But as I was saying, there are some key factors that usually play in when you sort of estimate how long something's going to take. The first and foremost thing is, how many dependencies does the project have? In other words, how much can you as a single unit, depending on if you're a person or a team, do without like lead times and things like that to other stakeholders, or waiting for other people to do some part or so forth. That is a very big factor into how fast something can be delivered. So in, for example, the sort of systems that I've seen where you have maybe a lot of integrations, or you have a lot of like upstreamed APIs or something like that, where you need to connect to people, or someone is connecting to you, well, then you can't just chip things right and left. You have usually some type of collaboration going on, and that can take a lot longer. Even though the application might be super simple, you have to wait for people. You have to email people, then they're on vacation, then they don't have time, they're working on something else, like etc. So something that should have on paper taken, say, like a day, can take months, because you simply don't have an ability to actively work on the thing that you're dealing with. But then there are like that's the number one factor usually for like extreme delays. The second factor is basically down to it's the human factor in essence, where if you have the right group of people, things will be very, very smooth and very, very quick and very, very effective. If you have the wrong group, it does not matter how simple the project is, because they are incapable, or like they're incompetent basically. Well, they don't have to be incompetent per se, but they simply lack the ability to code or to execute at the level where a smooth execution is possible. I can give you examples of this where now I don't want to sound like that, but I don't want to toot my own horn, but the progress, I've been on projects where the progress that I made as a single individual on a project was greater than the progress where the same project was in the hands of, I think, 5 other developers. The reason why that is possible is because the combination of people is like we are working in one part is of course experience levels, but it's not just about experience levels, it's also about individual aptitude and talent for the work, where you might have 2 or 3 coworkers who actually need help to such a degree that they are pulling away the time from other people because they need that support. So in effect, you don't actually have 5 people working at like maximum capacity. You're actually in a more complicated situation where the support need between people creates a situation where they're actually less productive as a unit overall. But that doesn't necessarily mean, and this is the kicker, right? The people who might be the people who are providing that support may, even if they are undisturbed, not be able to produce at the same level as like someone who is more experienced, etc., etc. So this is where it becomes complicated. I'll give you an example. If you have someone who is extremely good at what they do, they will be able to provide the support necessary to the less experienced software developers, get them back on track, and then still make more progress on their own thing. And then someone who is maybe not as experienced does have to provide the same support, but the time they spend in support hours takes longer, and the time that they have to spend on doing their own thing may also take longer. It's the talent thing. It's sort of like sports team or anything like that, guys. It's a very complicated thing to estimate how fast something's gonna go, because it really comes down to a very, very, very tricky combination of what people are you dealing with, what types of problems are you dealing with, and do they actually have the aptitude to solve these things in a more efficient way. A classic saying that a lot of people use, which is like, don't work harder, work smarter. I like to say that, yeah, that's great if you're smart enough to actually work smarter. And on average, this sort of hyper optimized workflows, like the super productive people that some people like sort of wants to use as a benchmark for how fast things can go and so forth, these are not the norm. These are like most people work hard because they can't work smarter. It's like that they lack that capacity. It's the same thing as, there are some geniuses in our history that have come up with like most insane ideas that have propelled our entire species forward in our scientific understanding and things like that. These sorts of geniuses, guys, they will make everything go much faster. But if you put it in on an average team, you have one, then there's going to be one time. I mean, if you put it in the hands of people who are really, really unproductive, it's going to take even longer. So yeah, it's really basically impossible for me to answer this question for you in a more granular way. So what I want you to take away from this is basically that doesn't really matter how long something should take. It really comes down to what you're talking about, and the main 2 factors that usually makes up how long something takes is, number 1, how many dependencies do you have, because it doesn't matter how complicated or how big or how small something is. If you have to wait for somebody else or something like that, that's always factor number 1. Number 2 is when you're actually working actively on it, who is going to do the work, and what type of complexity does this work actually have. If you're going to solve something extremely complicated, even if you're really, really smart, it's going to take a really, really long time. The best thing that you can usually do is, as I've said before, to try to find the right combination of people. If you have the right combination of people, basically anything will go really, really quickly, and anything anything that's even simple things will take forever if you have the wrong people doing it. So my suggestion to you is to focus less on how long you're taking to do something, because the reality is that the more skilled you are, the faster you will execute. And that realization is the most important part. There's not like an inherent thing to you that, oh, this project should take that amount of time or that amount of time, and so forth and so forth. There is an average, like in sport, like someone is averagely fit, they're gonna run or like lift a certain weight or so forth, and someone who's really, really fit will do it in a shorter amount of time. Same deal for us when it comes to projects. And that's the thing that you should focus on. Don't stress so much about how long you're taking. Focus on being better, like getting better at the thing. Take the time necessary and focus primarily on that, because as long as nobody's shutting down the project or so forth, it doesn't matter if it takes forever. I've been on projects where they've traded one in, like me as a person like working on the thing, for 5 other people, and the work is still taking longer, but they're happy with it because they could unload. Then they basically took these people, put that project on them, and I could move and do something else that was more that was different, if that makes sense. It's the same thing for you. When you get to that situation where you have reached a point where you're quote unquote so productive that you can do things much, much quicker, I promise you that point you will only reach that by getting as good as you can. And even if something takes, from your perspective, longer or so forth and so forth, that doesn't really matter. What matters is the thing that, all these other people or you or whatever, is this still building value? Is this still something that you should be focusing on? Or is there some deadline, or is there some point where you just go, actually, no, we're not investing in this thing any longer. Let's just give up. Because if you think about it, guys, there are some things that should have, let's just talk about politics, or like human evolution, or so like human rights, or whatever. Take whatever hot topic you want, right? There's a lot of stuff that should have probably already been chalked down to, yeah, we don't really think that slavery should have taken a few hundred years to solve, right? But it's the way it is, guys. It doesn't really matter how we feel about it. The question is, are you going to continue trying to solve the problem? Have a great day.